Okay, so I'm going to be talking to you about our solution, the BlockRx Pharma Ecosystem, which was an initiative from iSolve, which is a Philadelphia-based consulting company. So before we go into the history of the project, we'll just explain what the BlockRx Pharma Ecosystem actually is. So first, it's as a blockchain, we're operating on the Hyperledger Sawtooth by Intel. We're using the BlockRx utility token for blockchain entries and data exchange, so it is incentivized. And we use advanced digital ledger technology, which is a software from iSolve, which I'll explain shortly, to integrate legacy systems with the blockchain. So we've spent a few years, probably since 2015, talking to different pharma companies and various use cases, ranging from R&D, supply chain, post-marketing surveillance, clinical trials, intellectual property acquisition, all the way to direct patient interaction. So we are mostly pharma drug manufacturer focused with a crossover to healthcare. And how we got here was in 2014, iSolve was spun off from GPMS, which was a parent company who's consulting for a wide variety of industries. And they were getting enough requests from pharma to justify their own pharma specialist company. And in 2015, they married some of the knowledge they were getting from the financial world, where they were talking about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and just general blockchains, and started presenting it to pharma companies. That eventually led in 2016 to the creation of the BlockRx Project, which aimed to bring interested parties within the pharma supply chain and pharma manufacturers to create study groups and develop use cases. So this led to, right now we're partnered with, I think, a couple of dozen pharma companies, as well as consulting firms and solution providers, which led to the development of the ADLT software. And this year, things really started to take off, where we solidified our partnership with Intel, as well as Your Encore, who's a major solution provider in the pharma space. We also realized in talking to a lot of the pharma industry that to implement this and get a lot of the solutions they want to, since this is very disparate, you're getting a lot of parties at the table, it would have to be incentivized with a token. So we're having our token offering this year in September. We should be going live with our first pharma use cases around Q3 or Q4 of this year, so we're pretty excited about that. And that will lead in 2018, the lessons that we learned from those use cases, to actually get the BlockRx Pharma ecosystem up and running. And we will also introduce the BlockRx patient app, which, like I said, we're manufacturer focused, but they recognize the need to get patients involved. So this is going to be a medium by which patients will be able to participate in an industry-focused blockchain. So I think there are two key use cases in pharma that kind of jump out as saying these would be great for blockchain. That's looking at the drug supply chain as well as patient support. Now, in the drug supply chain, where the industry has some blind spots, as it were, is in data visibility. So you have this huge global network of pharma trade partners that can't view internal and external product data. This is due to a variety of reasons. Some of it's technical. Good part of it is regulatory. Another good part of it is cultural, but you just have a plethora of systems that just will not communicate with each other. The second factor is regulations. I think, as we all know, we're involved in healthcare and pharma. This is a business defined by regulation. In particular, you have track and trace legislations have been introduced in most countries. In the US, it's the Drug Supply Chain Security Act. And the industry right now is not prepared, and compliance is quite costly. And the reason they're not prepared is this visibility issue that they're facing. And the third problem is traceability. That's just be able to track the provenance and establish provenance of their drugs. So what DSCSA in particular is mandating is you need to pick, if somebody grabs a pill off the shelf, any pill, you should be able to go through the entire supply chain and tell me not just who touched it, but exactly which batches of raw material went into making that drug. And again, because of the visibility issue, that there's no communication, that's pretty much impossible at this stage. So we think blockchain can help out a lot there. And the second use case is in patient support. So patient engagement has been recognized by industry, government players, pretty much across healthcare as key to bridging gaps in drug development, clinical trial recruitment, drug safety, and also the opioid epidemic. So if you're interested in public health outcomes, in our white paper, we quote a great paper looking at how patient engagement could help alleviate the opioid epidemic that is happening in the States. Also, cost is a huge issue for patients. As right now, the average patient is struggling to maintain a balance between healthcare costs and effective outcomes. And this isn't just reserved for the United States. This is a global phenomenon where healthcare costs are rising everywhere. In other places around the world, like in my case, I'm based in Canada, it's not affecting me directly in the wallet, but it does affect me in the public coffers. If we're spending more on healthcare, that's less that we could spend on education, on taking care of the roads, on snow removal, etc. And the third problem is with privacy. There are very strict data privacy laws. HIPAA in the US, Europe has very strict data privacy laws, and the price for non-compliance is extremely high. This is both in the forms of fines as well as the market costs that you're going to pay if you accidentally leak patient data. Okay, so we're planning to tackle this with the BlockRx Pharma Ecosystem. And there are three technical parts to the stack that make up the ecosystem. First is the Hyperledger Sawtooth by Intel. Now, we chose Sawtooth because first, we obviously need to support smart contracts. We also need a modular platform because there's going to be no one-size-fits-all solution for any company. People are facing different issues. Companies might have different requirements as well, so they need to be able to build up the system that they require. Also need it to be high performance, permitting a large number of transactions. We have 100,000 transactions per day here. I think they mention 1,000 transactions per second, which is about the right frequency that we've seen from our partners. And it also needs to support digital tokens in order to incentivize the system. And we're going to explain why the system has to be incentivized later on. The second branch is the Advanced Digital Ledger Technology, which was developed by iSolve. And this integrates legacy systems with the blockchain. So you could use any ERP, any data streaming from any IoT device or any digital record can be placed on the blockchain. Then will be data agnostic. So you don't have to buy a particular sensor to get onto the blockchain. And the third component is the BlockRx digital token. So this is to incentivize participation by the trade partners. So by trading in the token, you could offset the burden of remaining compliant, as well as incentivizing patients. I mean, I think in healthcare, we all recognize the importance of getting patient data. It's one thing to say that we require patient data. It's another thing to actually go out and get that patient data. So by incentivizing patients to share their data, we think it's going to be easier. So the way the drug manufacturing process works now, so this is just on the manufacturing side, is you start with your active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturer that takes raw materials and eventually turns it into the main ingredient. They ship it off to production, who manufactures the pills, then a packager who packages it all up, that sends it off to market. And the way it works now is they work in bulk. You get batches. So you prepare a large batch of raw material that eventually makes its way through the chain. Now, anytime there's any sort of a change, so if you take your bulk API and turn it into a pill, obviously that's going to change the serial number. So you change, or if you take your raw material and change it somehow, if you add a methyl group to it, then all of a sudden you have to give it a new identification number. Now, because these are done in large batches and they're transporting from company to company, you lose information. So by the time you get to market and you pick up package E501, there's no way to tell that it may have been made with key intermediary B202, at least with the way things work now. So that's what we're talking about with provenance. So if there's a problem in the market with this package, there's no way for the packagers, the production, or the API manufacturer to figure out which batch it actually came from, which batch is really causing the problem. So we're designing the BlockRx Pharma Ecosystem to manage the drug supply chain. So the previous schema that I showed you earlier was all the manufacturers. They're all folded up in here, but it includes manufacturers, your third-party logistics, who do the shipping, a wholesaler, your pharmacies, as well as the patients. with a digital ID key. We'll give them permission to enter the blockchain, to register entries onto the blockchain. And with a digital token, we'll be able to pay for data coming back and forth, either receive token to place data onto the blockchain or give token to purchase data. And I think on one podcast where I heard somebody was asked, can you define blockchain in 10 words or less, saying it's a chain of blocks? That's exactly what the blockchain will do. So if you have your initial product, your API is A101, anything it gets turned into, A101 is going to be linked to B201, and so on and so forth. So by the time the pharmacy picks up E501, if they need to tell the manufacturers there's something up with it, the manufacturer will be able to tell exactly which batch it came from throughout the entire supply chain. It will also leave a fingerprint saying who actually touched E501 throughout the chain. So this is what we have been building with Intel and our drug supply chain partners. Now, why are we incentivizing it? Like I said, we're using the BlockRx token functionality. So pharma companies and patients must acquire the token either from an exchange or from our reserve. This will permit them to interact with smart contracts, to work out their smart contracts, to place data or look at data and participate just in any ecosystem and reward programs. So this incentivizes people to actually interact. So if the manufacturer wishes to get data from the wholesaler because they want to see what's happening to their pills after they go off, well, they will send a smart contract with a certain amount of token to the wholesaler, and the wholesaler will give them the right digital key in order to gain access to that data. At the same time, on the patient end, they can use their token in exchange for reducing their healthcare costs. Participating in other patient programs, getting better accessibility to participate into clinical trials, et cetera, et cetera. So all in all, we're using the token in order to incentivize trusted partners to join and interact with the blockchain and hopefully make it into a very, very vibrant community. We have identified 5 key benefits of utilizing the BlockRx token. The first is the actual token value. As it gets used by trade partners, then you can hopefully reduce your operational costs. Second is regulatory readiness. By leveraging the token, you could get disparate systems and organizations to actually integrate properly and integrate their regulatory deliverables. So hopefully you can get submissions are better streamlined. Reducing the time to market, because hopefully with the blockchain and by using the token, you can reduce the time that you spend on operational, administrative, and deployment tasks to expedite your business. Then decrease operational expenditures, which is pretty much the same thing as time to market, and gain patient-level data. As patients will be participating and gaining tokens, companies will have access to more patient data, which will help them understand the patient and improve outcomes. So if we identify the participants for the blockchain, first we have suppliers who will greatly benefit from understanding the status of their inventory and their active pharmaceutical ingredients, as well as gain traceability, so they'll actually see what happens to their product. Third-party logistics will gain what all third-party logistics want, which is greater visibility into their process to help reduce redundant overhead costs. The trade partners, so these are the pharma companies who are trading amongst themselves, will get greater visibility into brands and products and can help offer rebates and reduce payment time. Then you can get your data providers who can customize, package, and secure information to help support cost reduction from operations and inventory and potentially sell this across the chain. And lastly is patients, with incentive programs may be offered and managed through BlockRx, thus allowing for mutual benefits and savings. And the overall benefits for the trusted participants, so this is going to be the pharma companies themselves, is, well, you get a view into global inventory data. You get a view of patient-level data. This gives you a view of improved outcomes. So this way you can help develop more refined solutions. You can actually see where things are going wrong in the supply chain. Another issue is in the recall process. Right now, recalls are quite messy and broad-based. It's like almost using a shotgun to kill a fly. So if you have provenance, once this is established throughout the supply chain, the recall process is potentially improved with improved traceability. On the business side, you can use smart contracts to reduce payment terms as settlement identification is executed on the blockchain, which is something that's done pretty routinely in other industries right now. And you could establish better and stronger partner collaborations. Okay, now the last bits, it says services provided by iSolve, but this is actually services that can now be provided by the service providers of pharma, which is a lot of these are things that do not exist in pharma right now. They could start offering software as a service, obviously get better visibility into global inventory, better recall management, global traceability. Something else that's brand new is data as a service. I think there are people who have been talking about this in healthcare and pharma for a while. Within the pharma manufacturers, this does not exist. So this could be a new branch of economics for them. And lastly, data acquisition.